Thanks very much, Joseph, for the kind introduction. Yeah. And thanks everybody for being here. And I want to start by thanking the organizing committee for their wonderful job in the organization of the conference, of the event. Particularly Professor Sonja and Stanley Naya for her invitation and the very welcoming invitation to be here today. It's an honor for me to be addressing you as a main speaker. I want to also thank the association, particularly the chair of the association, Professor Megan Morris, my good friend and colleague Larry Grosberg as well, for also suggesting me as a possible speaker for this event. And I wouldn't want to go on without mentioning that, at least for somebody like me of my generation, Bob Marley, being in the land of Bob Marley, who for us was one of the great prophets of our generation, was an important attraction also for coming to Jamaica. Not only that, obviously, and so many other wonderful musicians and wonderful politics, cultural and left politics in this country and in the Caribbean as a whole, but I wanted to mention that as well, because it came up repeatedly actually last night in the set of the speeches at the official reception by the acting Prime Minister. And I want to start also by two very brief apologies, or rather apologies explanations about two absences in the talk and about one caveat. The two apologies is, the first one is that the talk will not mention at all, will not refer at all to the Caribbean region. And that's for both practical reasons and epistemological reasons. I believe, of course, and this came up repeatedly yesterday, we have so much to learn from the Caribbean as a very important space of crossings and crossroads, historically and contemporary speaking. But my talk will refer not even to Latin America as a whole, but especially to South America as a sub-region, and even more to particular countries within South America that you will realize as I go along. The second is the absence of any reference, significant reference to the sacred. Now, that won't be completely absent. It will be present directly in what I will mention in terms of what I call relational ontologies. And you will know what I mean when I get to that point towards the end of the presentation. But I was very happy to see that yesterday the sacred and the spiritual was very much present, and I hope that the spirit will continue to pervade the conference and including my presentation, even if it's going to be more standard academic style, let's say, or logocentric if you wish. And beginning with the spiritual invocation by the poet and the drumming, and also continuing with a concept that I really like from Professor Jackie Alexander when she said that, and I hope I'm getting the quote right, that crossroads, let me see if I find it, crossings are never taken once and for all, nor all at once. Crossings are never taken once and for all, nor all at once. And I was wondering whether we are facing, or in this particular moment, a particular moment of crossings and crossroads that has to do also with what Professor Brathwaite in his presentation called historical catastrophes. And he was referring, of course, to the case of slavery and to the rise of the people out of that experience of disempowerment. People, he said, without power that become empowered, especially by appealing to culture and spirituality and so forth, and through a prolonged struggle of coming to terms with histories and their own voices and so forth. And how, in many ways, what is happening in Latin America, particularly in some countries of the Andes, can be seen in such a light. And I'm thinking, of course, particularly about indigenous peoples, but not only indigenous peoples in the countries of the Andes. And so that was very much present, and especially whether we are also not facing a particular time of historical catastrophe in terms of the profound ecological crisis that is evident, at least if we know how to see it. It might not be evident in the environments and landscapes and urban dwellings in which we as middle-class people, most of us, or intellectuals, academics move, but it's certainly evident in so many different aspects of social and social-natural life. And also the great sort of demographic catastrophes that are happening today and that will apparently continue to increase in depth and reach as we move along in a world that doesn't seem to be learning from the lessons from the past. And that the lessons from the past is precisely what might be going on in some Latin American countries, and we'll get to that. And so that the spiritual, and again with Jack Alexander, will have to be taken seriously as within the space, as something that is important within the space of knowledge-making and world-making projects. That means as a political fact. Okay. And the caveat is something very simple. The caveat is that what we're going to present is a working hypothesis, and as a working hypothesis, it's an attempt at interpretation, and I will try to make explicit what interpretation comes from. I will try to at least make the case that this is not a completely idiosyncratic reading of what has been happening in some South American countries, that at least is credible reading. One situates oneself in the space of some movements, some social movements, and the activists and intellectual activists that are producing the kind of interpretation that I'm also going to try to speak about. And in the space of some debates that might be marginal now in South America as a whole, but that are beginning to reverberate in different ways. And so that in a sense, I'm always worried, of course, of confusing our own utopias as researchers or academics or intellectuals or activists, even working with movements, and the utopias and desires of those who are actually bringing about or attempting to bring about those transformations. But you will be the judge of that, of course. Okay, and I am going to talk for about 45 to 50 minutes. So we will still have some time for discussion. Let me know. I'm going to be using a PowerPoint. So, and I prepared this PowerPoint with a smaller room in mind. Unfortunately, I realize now there's quite a bit of text, which everybody says is a killer for a PowerPoint. But you will have it. We'll probably put it on the website. I would suggest that those of you who are really far in the back, if you are not, if you want to read, be able to read, move closer. And also, those of you, especially those of you who might not be completely familiar with Colombian English or Latin American English, might want to come closer as well so that you can see. But if at any point in time you're not hearing me in the back or you're not understanding exactly what I'm saying, then please let me know. Okay, so basically, what I'm going to talk about today, this is a brief outline to give you an idea of sort of the layout of the presentation, is what is it that is behind the names and faces of people like Hugo Chavez, or Evo Morales, or Rafael Correa, or Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, I'm sorry, or Lula, or Bachelet, or Tabaré Vázquez, or Lugo now, all of these people that are heading governments that are considered to be part of the turn to the left in Latin America. So how do we build a place to look at these transformations from within and also from without? And in that context, I found very useful the concept of conjuncture. I'm going to be talking about a little bit at the beginning of that. And then I will give you a sense, a more intuitive sense of the transformations that are happening today in Latin America by reading some statements made by some of the most prominent actors, not only the presidents obviously, but some presidents as well, about how they see the transformation themselves. And then in part 4, that is going to be the bulk of the presentation, I will try to make the main argument that how do we see the transformations in terms of two potentially contradictory and different projects. One, are they just alternative forms of modernization that will not challenge sufficiently the basic models of society, or do they attempt something, a more radical societal transformation, and if so, how can we see that? Are they decolonial projects, as some people, also including some indigenous intellectuals, begin to call them? And are we moving maybe towards what a number of people are beginning to refer to as post-capitalist, post-liberal, and post